So thank you so much, Natasha, for joining me today. I absolutely love the organisation you work for, Global Action Plan, also known as GAP. Could you tell me a little bit about the mission and what your role within it is?
Yeah, of course. And very excited to be here today, Christabel. Thank you. We're an environmental charity first and foremost, but absolutely everything we do is helping people make the connections between what's good for us as human beings and what's good for the planet, and to not see them as separate, but to see them as both two sides of the same coin, so that we are not seeing that, when we have to do things that are good for the planet, that it's somehow seen as a sacrifice or something that is going to be difficult or unpleasant to do, but actually to see those things as in terms of the benefits that they have for us as individuals, for a society, for all sorts of issues, from air quality to inequality.
Brilliant. I love the tagline on the website that says, "We can live happily without ruining the earth we depend on." I think that's so important because, the way that a lot of our mainstream culture, mainstream messaging, kind of like the path it takes us on is often a path of like deep unsustainability, of consumerism and hyper-consumerism, and all kind of being fed by this growth-based economy that depends on us buying more and more and accumulating more and more. And I'd love to hear about the campaign that you run that addresses consumerism and how you're connecting people's well-being with planetary well-being through looking at consumerism.
Yeah, so we run a lot of different programs that are looking at this, but we've done a lot of work with young people in particular to work with them to understand the pressures that they're under to continually keep buying, and particularly on social media. We're not kind of criticizing social media. There's lots of good things about social media. But it does mean that young people are particularly exposed to messages all the time, telling them that what's really important about them is how they look, that they need to have new products all the time, to be cool, to be liked by other people. And they're constantly encouraged to engage in like social comparison. So, how am I doing compared to my friends, which is, all these things are a recipe for not feeling very good about yourself.
Yeah.
And there's been, a lot of research that shows that excessively focusing on these things, like focusing on how you look, how popular you are, what status you have, and comparing yourselves to other people is a recipe for unhappiness.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of research that shows the links to, spending your time and energy in that way, and greater rates of anxiety, depression, loneliness, eating disorders. Yeah. The list goes on.
There's a brilliant quote by someone called that says, "Comparison is a thief of joy," and I really love to remember that when I catch myself kind of comparing myself with others, because again, I think, like, as you say, social media, there's so many wonderful things about social media and the way it connects us, and we can share ideas and thoughts and beliefs, and, in that respect, it's wonderful. But there is this other side of it, which is very showy offy, and you kind of see this manicured version of someone's life and someone's body and face, and the way you can now adapt, really easily from your own phone, change the way that you look and stuff. And I guess the difference is also with social media is that it used to be that advertising was just on the telly and magazines and newspapers, but now you basically have advertisements in your back pocket every time you go on, to speak to a friend or something. It's there. So it's really infiltrated so much of our life in quite a subversive way. I don't notice the amount of advertising, and I've said before that advertising doesn't affect me. I never buy things that I have been advertised, but yeah, I'm very deeply committed to certain brands, so clearly it has had an effect.
We all like to think we're not impacted by advertising, which is why it's so clever.
Yeah.
But we're doing a lot of work at the moment at looking at particularly the impacts of online advertising for young people. And you've got to remember that, everything on the internet is free for a reason. It's free because it's funded by advertising.
Yeah.
And the reason it's funded by advertising is because there's money to be made. And, so everything is designed, the way that our social media platforms are designed by very clever techie people who use, very clever kind of techniques from the gambling industry and things to keep our eyeballs on our screens. Why? Because that's how the money's made behind the scenes, is from advertisers paying more and more and more, the more people that are going to see those adverts. And of course, advertising is way more subtle these days. It's not necessarily an ad, it's becoming much more difficult for particularly children who actually are not as capable of distinguishing what's being sold to them and what the intent behind that is already. When you've got, your favorite influencer, your favorite YouTuber just casually throwing in, that they're using this product, they don't necessarily look like adverts anymore. So we're being influenced all the time. I mean, why are influencers called influencers? Because they do, a lot of young people and a lot of us, whatever age we are, do look up to them and do want to emulate the kinds of things they're doing. Yeah. So when they say something, it's very, very powerful. Yeah. But I think the side of that is often not talked about so much is the environmental impact of that, of the way that we're being influenced to constantly be, barraged with messages of buy this, buy this, buy this. And we might resist it, a lot of the time, but it's very hard for any of us to resist it all the time. Yeah. The amount of resources that are being used to make the stuff that we're being sold is having an absolutely devastating impact on the planet.
Yeah, and you can see that also with like kind of the green consumerism that's occurring now, isn't it? So I've noticed in myself this kind of tendency to feel like it's okay so long as it's like sustainable, but consumerism itself is unsustainable. If we continue, even if we switch to completely sustainable products, if we continue to consume at the rate that we're consuming, we would still be in a terrible position and we would still be wreaking complete havoc on the natural world. So I think it's, it's not just about what you're consuming, it's how much you're consuming.
Yeah, absolutely. And, of course, there are some great sustainable brands out there that are, providing things for us in a much more sustainable way, which is fantastic, and don't want to discourage that. But at the same time, I think it's, we would encourage people to question a bit more, well, do I really need this in the first place? And start to question as well, what's made me feel like I want this product? Is it, who am I being influenced by? And, why do they want to influence me to buy this? And, I think there's, don't know if this is slightly going off on a tangent, but there's this, particularly in the fashion world, fashion and beauty world, particularly aimed at women, there's kind of this myth of, we're sold clothes and beauty products as a route to empowerment, that, that's how we feel confident. That's how we are, show who we are in the world. When in reality, who's, the people making our clothes are women living in often appalling conditions and working in appalling conditions, having to leave their children at home while they go and work in appalling factories. That ain't female empowerment. And, where's the money going? The money is rising up through to the top of top of the tree, often to men. So I think it's starting to question, where are these messages coming from and who benefits from them? And yes, it's great to start to look at, okay, I'm not going to buy that dress from Topshop and give my money to Philip Green. And I'm going to, buy from a more sustainable, retailer. Great. But we also are looking at this from why do you feel the need to have so many clothes in the first place? And actually, that of course we all want to look nice, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when we spend, a lot of this is about kind of the well-being kind of benefits behind not consuming so much, generally because it frees us up. It frees us up to spend our time and our money on things that genuinely have a bigger impact on our happiness than buying another dress, no matter where we buy that dress from.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, you've put it so well. It's about questioning the why and the how and the who, the brilliant campaign, Who Made My Clothes, actually connecting with the story behind the product that we're buying, and not just seeing it as a quick fix for our ego in order for us to kind of fit a new idea of how we're going to look and how we're going to present ourselves to the world. Fashion and clothing and beauty is an art form, and it's it's wonderful, but art is also a true expression, and it can be truthful. So I think we want to be very truthful in our approach to the way that we engage with these products, and really ask ourselves, do I really need this? Where has it come from? What are the unseen, the hidden costs of this purchase? And also, once I'm done with this purchase, once I've worn it so many times, then what happens to it? And just really starting to engage with the story of a piece, rather than just that immediate feeling ooh, I look so good in that, and then buying it. There's so much more. Life is so complex, isn't it? And there's so many layers to this.
Absolutely. And I suppose it comes down to being more mindful about the way that we consume, and I think just questioning ourselves a little bit. And am I buying this just to cheer myself up? And sometimes we do, because we're encouraged that is a strategy, a good coping strategy, that, treat yourself. How many times do you see that a day? And it's seen as something nice for us to do for ourselves, as self-care by buying things. But actually the research shows that, yes, you do get that tiny kind of spike of dopamine when you buy something new, but it doesn't last very long. Yeah. And it actually distracts us from doing things that have a much, much bigger beneficial impact on our mental well-being, like doing some exercise, going out for a walk, spending some time in nature.
So also, as well as, the kind of the human rights aspect of, say, the fashion industry and the beauty industry is also huge in the with e-products, so with our computers and our phones and our anything basically cable wise. Can you tell me a little bit about that as well? Because that's I feel in our mainstream awareness, that's an area that we're really not in touch with.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many environmental problems linked to the amount of e-waste we're creating, both in terms of how we're sourcing the precious metals to make them in the first place, but also what we're doing with them when we finish with them. And a lot of them get shipped to other countries where they're dumped, and they're causing a lot of problems for people's health with the kind of harmful chemicals leaking out. So huge environmental problem. And there's kind of two sides to this. There's the whole concept of what's called planned obsolescence, which works in two ways. There's the kind of technological obsolescence, that technology is moving so fast that, by the time we've used our laptop for 4 or 5 years, the newer technology just doesn't work with it very well. And so we're kind of forced to upgrade to a new version, which can be very frustrating for a lot of people who don't necessarily want to buy a new phone or a new laptop, but because technology just doesn't work that well anymore. And the other side of it is the kind of psychological obsolescence. So we are made to feel like if you have, an iPhone 4, that's just really quite socially unacceptable when there's an iPhone, 11 out there. So it's kind of our own feeling of, oh God, I'm going to get left behind if I don't have this new version that does all these new things. And so some of it, so it's a really tricky one because sometimes it's actually not our fault. We don't want to buy the new version and we have to.
Yeah.
And then sometimes there's the side of it is like, well, actually we feel that psychological, social pressure that we should have the latest version of everything.
Yeah, because I read that there's 40,000 children as young as 7 that are sent down mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo each year to collect the cobalt and lithium batteries that power our electronic devices. And, going back to what we were saying earlier about clothing and the hidden environmental costs, I mean, that is just so hidden from our... you don't see that in the very neat tech shops with everything so clean line. You don't see it's very...
It feels so modern and sleek and...
gives you chills.
And then you realise, where do the resources come from? And as you said, the Democratic Republic of the Congo is one of the real, disaster stories of the tech industry. And, often companies kind of get away with it because they have such complex supply chains that, they subcontract another company to another company to another company who eventually, they can say, oh no, our hands are clean. We don't contract companies that use, child labor. But the company that's the company of the company of the company that are subcontracted all the way down the line end up that they do. And this is a big reason why, our products can be so cheap because we, way down the line, the people actually extracting the minerals from the ground, are often working in horrific conditions with very poor pay. And, children, and another example of where children are often used to mine is in the beauty industry. The stuff that makes our eyeshadow shimmery, called mica, I never quite know how to say it properly, is mined often in India. And there's, estimated around 20,000 children mining mica that is just used to make our makeup sparkly. So again, that kind of hidden cost behind what seems as kind of fun and frivolous, to us. There's a story behind absolutely everything we use. It all comes from somewhere. Someone has, everything comes from the earth. It has come from somewhere. It's been transported to us and then ends up in a shiny box, in our shops or through our doors.
Wow. And GAP, Global Action Plan, have got a really wonderful, you really lead with storytelling. And I really love that about the work that you guys put out and the campaigns that you run. Why do you think storytelling is an important aspect to kind of harness collective motivation to make changes and also, to allow people to vision another way? Because I think another aspect of storytelling is that we often don't think that another way is possible. We kind of feel like we've been handed this lot. This is the way it is. So just kind of deal with it. And actually, the point where we're at right now with consumerism and with waste, while it's huge, it hasn't been going on for that long. It's a couple of decades really that it's been escalating. So, it's not an inevitable part of human nature. Probably is an inevitable part of our growth-based economy, which maybe that's the thing we need to be looking at. But I'd love to hear about, the role of storytelling with your work.
Storytelling is so important because it's how our brains process information. We know that just kind of bombarding people with statistics and facts doesn't change people's minds. It doesn't change how people think about things. How we make sense of the world is through stories. And, particularly, as I said before, a lot of the work we're doing with young people. So, anyone under the age of 30, probably even older, actually. It's all we've ever known is this kind of consumerist culture. You know, I was a child of the 80s. I was bombarded with adverts, but, you know, it's just, so it's really hard for us to see. It's like we can't see the wood for the trees. We don't really question it. It's just normal. So that's why a lot of the work we're trying to do is to help people see, well, actually, this doesn't have to be normal. But there's a real lack of exciting visions of how the world could be. So this is one of the big things that we're trying to work on at Global Action Plan at the moment is, you know, a lot of visions of a sustainable way of living can feel very detached from the ways that we actually live. So it feels like you have to go and live in a field in an eco village somewhere and be completely separate from normal society in order to live in a sustainable way. It's not very helpful because that's not most people's lives. So we desperately need and, you know, call out there to everyone who can help with this. So at the moment, we're doing an exciting project with the kind of, with the creative industry. So we've put a call out to young filmmakers to think about, you know, how can we show a positive vision of how we can live in more sustainable ways where consumerism isn't the norm. What does that look like? And it's a real big challenge. But we desperately need to do this because a lot of the work that we've done with young people, we've realized it's really hard for them to make some of those, you know, big sustainable lifestyle changes because, you know, they're like, well, I need to wear nice clothes to, you know, go to be prepared for, you know, in order to feel confident, or I need to, you know, have the latest phone in order to fit in at school, or, you know, or I need to have, earbuds, you know, because everyone else has got them. So it's like, it's really hard for kids or, you know, young people going into work as well. Like, well, I need to have the right outfit so that I can get the right job and look the right way. These things are so ingrained in our culture. It's really hard to not take part in them. So it's really important that we can help young people and all of us to see a different way where actually consumerism and buying new stuff all the time isn't the norm. And what does that look like?
I love that because I just think vision is really important because often when we think to the future, you know, well, when you're working within an environmental area, you know, and thinking about environmental sustainability and climate change, often it's very dystopian and you know, because you're so concerned about these issues, but actually we need to be focusing on, well, what world do we want to create? What is, if we were to get the political action that we're asking for, what does that look like? And start to really kind of collectively cultivate these ideas so that it's more tangible. For me personally, I guess a world where consumerism isn't kind of at the heart of our economy, you know, would be like a world of far greater freedom, but also probably a world where we work, well, you know, maybe like work less hours, because in order to consume so much, you need to work so much. And then, but also because you work so much, you don't have time to make your own clothes. You don't have time to make your own oat milk. I keep using oat milk as an example. Sorry, there are so many other examples, or your own pastry or whatever, you know, whatever it is. So because of the amount of work hours that we need to do, based on our economy, we need the convenience, but it's that convenience which kills. It's having to buy you know, ready-made food which comes in plastic, and you know all these things. So we did an interview with Dr. Juliet Shaw, and her works a lot about you know, how our time and our work time is related to the environment because of the way it's related to consumerism, and just this kind of cycle of productivity. It's very interesting, and how that degrades our human relationships as well, because we don't have time to invest into those either.
Yeah, we put our time and energy into the wrong things. And yeah, it's been quite an interesting time at the moment. Obviously, at the moment, we're in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, and people have had to make massive changes to their lives. And I think has been a real period of reflection where people are starting to think what's really important. And actually time with my family and time with my friends. And that's what's really important, rather than, you know, haven't seen, people on, saying, I'm so desperate to get out back to the shops. That's not what people are desperate to do, is it? People want to give their family a hug, and they want to, have fun with their friends again. These are the things that are really important and we really miss. And we miss that a lot in normal life, because so Juliet Shaw's amazing. Her work has been absolutely really influential into what we do. And I don't know if the story of stuff, talk about, we're in this, watch, work, spend cycle. So we work lots of hours, and then of course, because we've been working so hard, we're knackered. So we're really tired. All we can be bothered to do really is to flop in front of the telly, where we're then exposed to the versions of the perfect life that we should be aspiring towards. So then we spend our money on those things, and we just get stuck in this cycle of thinking that, that whereas if we, working less is absolutely, part of a healthier, happier and more sustainable lifestyle, where we have the time to spend on the things that are genuinely more important. Like you say, we're not reaching for the convenience and the quick fix of that kind of buzz of just buying things to cheer ourselves up. And we've got more time to invest in those things that genuinely make us happy.
I'd love to hear, before we wrap up, I'd love to hear either some tips from you, or maybe how people can get involved with the Global Action Plan campaign, #IDon'tBuyIt.
Yeah, so if I just quickly explain, our I Don't Buy It campaign came out of a load of work. We did lots of work going into schools, chatting to teenagers about the pressures that they feel to keep buying. And what really came out strongly was that they felt this pressure to aspire to a version of what's that's not real, like to perfection, to be to always look perfect, to act in the perfect way, and that it's not real. And so we kind of came up with this idea of, actually, I don't buy it. Like, that's not real. That's not how we are. So yeah, we got people to just notice the number of adverts they were seeing when they were on social media, just as a way of increasing people's awareness. So writing down everything they were sold in just 60 seconds on Instagram, and then posting that with the hashtag I don't buy it. So yeah, people can get involved. Come visit our website. So if you just Google, www.globalactionplan.co.uk, there's loads of information on there. You can sign up to our mailing list, and we'll tell you about all the cool things we're doing. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and Instagram. We're quite active on social media. But yeah, there was kind of 3 questions in there. There's top tips as well.
Top tips, yes, please.
Top tips. So I guess my top tip would be focus on the things that really make you happy. And so we use a model called the 5 Ways to Wellbeing, which was put together a few years ago now by the New Economics Foundation as a way of kind of really summarising the evidence of tons of evidence now of what we can do to really improve our well-being. And hint, none of it includes shopping. So first one is connect. So, prioritizing your relationships, making sure that you're giving yourself lots of time to connect with friends and family. The second one is keep learning. So, the more we learn, and there's so much to learn in this sphere as well, the life behind our products, what happens to our waste, what happens to, how are the companies that we're buying from treating their workers, loads of stuff about that at the moment but just keeping learning generally. So whether that's learning a new recipe, learning the piano, listening to podcasts, just our brains love to learn. So focusing on learning is a really, really good way. Keep active. So physical exercise, absolutely brilliant for our mental and physical well-being. has been found to be as effective and actually even more so than antidepressants in improving our mental health. And then the next one is take notice. So take notice in the sense of, so this kind of splits into two parts. So take notice in terms of being mindful, taking notice of the world around us, taking notice, being more conscious, but also taking notice of what we have and feeling grateful, having a sense of gratitude. And this is, what advertising does is try to make us feel dissatisfied with what we have so that we want more. So gratitude, of actually feeling really thankful and happy with what we have, is a real antidote to those messages. So feeling grateful, doing things like keeping a gratitude journal can have super, super big impacts on our well-being, but are also actually it's a really good way of us not being so tempted to buy stuff all the time when we appreciate what we have. And then finally, the final one is give. When we do things for other people, when we're kind, when we're thoughtful, when we're compassionate, when we're, are helping others, it makes us feel good. And again, our culture of consumerism is encouraging us all the time to be very me, very individualistic. What can I get? Rather than what can I give? So again, even though it seems unconnected, it's not. It's about shifting our way of thinking to think, well, actually, what can I do for others? How can I support others? And actually, spending money on other people has been shown to make us feel much happier than spending money on ourselves as well. So it's probably a slightly long answer to your question. Lots of tips in there, but it really is focusing on the things that really make us happy, really is the answer to moving away from a consumerist society.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Natasha, for all the wise words you've shared with us. I think, as you say, so much of what we are shown really kind of encourages us to think as individualistically as possible, but it's that kind of sense of individualism which cuts us off from the world around us. And if when we look at the world, what we're facing now is crisis of relationship and the way we're relating to ourselves, to our friends, to others, to humanity and to the natural world as well. So really remembering that we are relational beings, and by nourishing those relationships, we can really find the greater well-being on a personal and more planetary level as well. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been lovely to talk to you.